Neha, welcome to Emotionally Uncomfortable. I said you can swear here, be you, do all the things. Motherhood is one of those um, topics that I think there's a lot of performative behavior out there because underneath the layers is a lot of shame and guilt and
Mm,
a lot of I know for myself and the women that I work with, a lot of curiosity, and sometimes it's really difficult to say it out loud or have those conversations. So, would love to just pull back the layers with you of what called you to write this book. When were the little seeds planted inside of you, and um, like the courage to just use your voice, because I know so many women don't. So yeah, I'm going to give you the
mm.
microphone. Just pull it back just for a minute.
Well, because it's you and because it's this space, I'm actually going to say that this goes back to childhood. I think, we immigrated to the country when I was 3. We went to a predominantly white town. I'm obviously Indian. And I think there was always this ache for belonging, right? This trying to fit. And then in my 20s, I found a lot of that sort of belonging in what I did for work, right? And I think that that is universal for so many women in our generation who were raised on the sort of lean in era. And there was a lot of self worth and like stamps of approval. And then I went to business school almost in that same effort to just prove that I was worth it, that I belonged, that I'd earned my place. And then I had my first child. I'd landed what on paper was my dream job, and I was rocking with him. It was probably 3 months in. I had an overproduction issue, so I was just like drenched in milk. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd reached the ends of the internet. I think I was on like Lori Laughlin's daughter's best friend's Instagram page, right? That's when I knew. I was like, where am I? And yet there is like a sense of peace and belonging that I've had found just being with him. I think it was the first time I was like, I don't have to try so hard. All this kid wants is me. And there was something really freeing in that. And the reason I share that is because I did not choose to initially downshift. So I went part time and eventually I would pause after my second child. But I didn't choose to make room for family life because I thought it was better for my kid. I really genuinely did it because I was excited to sort of feel this new version of me and lean into it and see what happened. And I do think there was a lot of inner trust there. But the other side of it was so much societal pushback. And I think in holding those two things and navigating it, which we can talk more about, was born out of that the mission in the book.
Did you start like writing? Like, were you just like writing while breastfeeding in your phone? Like, how did you start to like unravel that?
Mm. So I had my first child in 2016. And so it was still the height of the lean in movement, the height of the girl boss era. And so there was a ton of content I was seeing around the traditional working parent. But even before I started writing, I was just listening to, I heard everything from, are you going to be bored all day? Um, are you giving up? Like,
Mm.
did you waste that spot at business school? And it was all from really well-intentioned people, really well-intentioned conversations. And I was holding it, obviously, like beelining it to therapy because it was in contrast to how I was actually feeling, which was like for the first time I feel at peace, for the first time I feel confident. By the way, I'm meeting these other women by nature of where I lived. At the time, I lived in downtown New York. And I was meeting these other women similar to me, had clocked in a decade in their careers or plus. They had sort of, more equal relationships with their partners. They weren't serving them cocktails at the end of the day. All of them were sort of noodling on like, what might come next? Maybe I'm going to freelance, maybe I'm going to consult, but like none of them match the caricature of the stay-at-home mother. And I was trying to figure out, well, why is this the case? And by the way, I should mention I'm like a chronic overthinker. So
Mm.
like my favorite hobby is overthinking people's problems. So like I was very happy to just over it. Before I wrote, I was just like trying to crack, why is my mother-in-law saying to me that I'm giving up? But these women don't represent giving up. They're actually like really interesting and creative and connected. And I'm actually feeling like this new version. And so I started a blog and Instagram. At the time, it was called Mother Untitled. It was called that up until very recently when I sort of rolled it in with the book. But the thesis of it was the exact same as the book,
Mm.
which is let's reframe this chapter of ambitious women making shifts to make room for family. And by the way, exploring, and let's shine a light on that, because otherwise we have an entire generation of women who are craving something different
Yeah.
and yet are being faced with all of these tropes of the shut-in stay-at-home mom.
I find it so fascinating. Like culture is obviously shifting, generational patterns are shifting, technology is shifting. What we have access to, our mothers did not have access to. How partners are showing up are very different. And the conversation hasn't changed. Like that's like the thing that's just the slow roll. And yet people like you are going, guys, this is incongruent. This is not
Hmm.
aligned. It doesn't make sense. Why are we still saying things like that? And I know when I started, I was a young mom. I was 18, so I already felt like I was failing. So then I became the overachiever. And
Mm,
so, but I actively was seeking female role models who I didn't really believe in balance at that point. I was like, okay, that's bullshit. But who felt like they were present at home and not necessarily abandoning the ambition, but it wasn't like an either or. It was like, how can we figure this out? Like, use our critical thinking skills. And I did see very black and white, like, you're either all here or you're all here. And I literally started the podcast because I felt like I was screaming. I was like, am I the only one? Why does everybody seem to be okay with this? And then, of course, as you start having the conversation, everyone starts raising their hand. Was there anything that was surprising to you as you started like writing and talking about this, even before, or maybe like what you've noticed since the book has come out, like doing your book tour and everything? Any surprising conversations that you're hearing from other women?
it's so interesting because people assume I started the project and then the book came out. There was 9 years in between,
Yeah.
right? And I've been sort of saying if you go back to the newsletter I sent, the very first one, it said the exact same thing, but the message was not as received, right? So think about saying the exact same message that something's not lining up. Ambitious women, by the way, the millennial generation, we're reaching this moment where we've clocked in quite a bit of time in our careers, and so this comes at a juncture where we might be reevaluating anyways, right? And so this and we are have access to all of these digital tools and technologies, so we're using these spaces when we're making room for family to actually grow. But it was thought of it in a bit as like anti-feminist. In some way, it was contradictory to all of the efforts that we were making in pushing women forward. And I would say
Mhm.
that was like the very early years was I was towing the line, but we were growing it was very small, right? And by the way, I was growing this in the fringe hours of family life. I was fully at home, and I'm so glad that I was, because it allowed me to really like navigate my lived experience. So at every juncture, whether it was like I need to navigate for myself how to answer the question, what do you do? I need to figure out financial dignity on my own. I need to figure out rhythms and routines. I need to work through my own stuff around health. So I had that lived experience, but it happened to line up then when my kids aged into school with coming out of the pandemic.
Mm.
And it was so quick. Suddenly, there was a recalibration because I think a couple things happened. For the first time, couldn't hide like how much work family life is. We were starting to see more flexible work options, and women were like, wait a second, this actually works well for us. Let's keep this going.
Mhm.
And then there was suddenly this permission slip to explore more options. And I always say I had the one pager for this book written in 2018, but it would have never been received the way it was.
Yeah.
Timing is everything. I'm so glad I planted the seeds for it in small ways, because in 2022, when I met my agent, in 2023, when I submitted it to Penguin, people were like, yes, this makes sense. There are ambitious women who just need more options.
Yeah.
So I think that piece is not necessarily surprising how quickly it changed, but it was a lesson in timing is everything, and people do catch up ultimately.
It's fascinating though how culture, I mean, you can see it through even trends. But so my oldest is 20, and I remember like the first thing that I did was teach. Okay, it's hilarious. My first digital product was called Teach Your Kid to Meditate because
Mm,
it was emotional regulation because he needed to change, and I'm laughing because I needed to emotionally regulate. Back then, mindfulness was not a thing. Like yoga was a thing, but mindfulness was like this new edge. And I've observed what has happened in 20 years, and it I don't know about you, but I feel like because of the internet, because of COVID, things have accelerated so fast. And also there's so many different conversations happening at once, like different niches of, I don't want to call it different niches of motherhood. And then I can see the next generation coming with their children. And I'm like, I don't understand that at all. Like, that's a completely different experience, which brings me to identity. And you talked about belonging and connection. I remember a moment where I had to physically opt out. Like it felt like a visceral response of the toxicity of motherhood. Like, I'm like, I have to mute, unfollow anything that's like, how much coffee did you have today? How stressed out are you? I'm like, I
mm,
don't want to be a part of this conversation. I wouldn't say motherhood almost killed me in 2013. I was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. It wasn't motherhood. It was societal expectations of who I needed to be as a woman. My children were never a burden. It was the story I was telling myself of what a good mother is. So I had to consciously opt out of that. But I do believe, I'm curious with when it comes to identity, career, and this primal instinct to belong, like why we even ask that question. What do you do? What do you do
mm.
for a living? I'm like, I'm a soul having a human experience at this point. That's how I answer that question. So I'm
I
just
love that.
curious what comes up for you.
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, you're so brave. Congratulations for making it to the other side. I think identity is the root of all of this, right? With ambition, feminism, womanhood, success. We have been, I think we talked a little bit about black and white ideas, right? And when we stepped into motherhood, in my case, whether it was the early aughts or in 2016, there was a sort of binary view on what ambition feminism looked like. And a lot of that was inherited from, what women needed to go through to prove their capacity. So like, if you look at second wave feminism in the 1970s, uh, we were coming out of World War II. We'd just taken all of these roles that were vacated by soldiers and being like, oh, we kind of like having a voice, having a wallet. And so we owe so much to that generation. But the sort of byproduct of that was anyone who was doing care work was associated with like fondling Tupperware. And at the same time, there was the rise of television and the rise of advertising. And so we were seeing these images representing what motherhood looked like. And it was associated with like June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver, which is a show from the 1950s. And sadly, if you still ask the American public, and we commissioned a survey called the American Mothers on Pause survey, the general population will still say a stay at home mother, the character that comes to mind is June Cleaver. You ask them about a working mother, and they will say Michelle Obama, Sheryl Sandberg, and Beyonce,
Mm.
right? That is far too large of a power chasm. It is far too much fact versus fiction. And we never caught up, right? So then the 80s came along and media loves a cat fight. So they glommed onto the mommy wars and they said, well, one side's better than the other. So women started digging into that narrative too, right? Of like, I'm at home because it's like healthy attachment for my kid. And the other one was like, I work because I want to model ambition. The reality is we were all making different nuanced choices that were right for us. And also the reality out of the research is that we were actually all ever shifting. So like 1 in 3 women working out of the home currently will pause their careers in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 will downshift their careers, and 90% of the women who are on pause will return, meaning that we're all ever evolving and ever shifting. And I think when we lean into that, it can be so freeing. But part of that means disassociating from ambition looks one way every single day. And ambition, I think many women fear if they take their foot off the gas, they're giving up on their ambition. And the reality about ambition, if you like dictionary definition, because I was at home with two kids and I remember thinking, I should be blogging, like I should be writing, like I shouldn't be lying on this couch, but I was exhausted. And I went and I looked in Merriam Webster and it said, ambition is the determination to do things. That's it. No clarification as to what those things are. And I started to think, well, what if ambition is the determination to do a great many different things over the long game of life? And we have a platter of priorities and we are shifting our energy away from one area into another area. But when thought of that way, ambition is just the self knowing and the trust to be able to align your time with what matters the most. Right. And then if you think about it that way, and it's ever shifting, and your ambition, you are recalibrating. If you choose to lean into family life for a chapter, if you choose to take your foot off the gas to prioritize your health, if you choose to let go of what a perfect mother is supposed to look like and just work on what's right for you, that is the ambitious choice.
Yeah.
And I think what do you do has just come to stand in for who are you in our culture, right? And I think we fear not having a very pithy way to say we belong because that's where our self-worth has always been tied up, our identifiers for ambition, our identifiers for success. So when you strip that title away, I think the biggest blessing is you realize like I get to just say right now, because it's a moment in time, I get to, in your case, take care of my health. We'll see what comes next. I
Mhm.
get to be with my children. We'll see what comes next. I get to, because what a gift, focus on something that you care about and leave room for other things to unfold. And you know, it's amazing to me how many women shy away from making the best right choice for them because they fear answering that question walking into a room.
Do you have like a one-liner, or when people ask you that question, like they don't know what you do, how you respond that's more aligned with, my titles don't really define me or the stage of life that I'm in?
Yeah, I think it's that script, the right now I get to
Mm,
blank.
yeah.
I often leave room for something else. I do think practicing is important because I think the way we own our stories infuses confidence into the roles we exist in, right? And the blend of roles. And what's ironic is I got so used to saying, right now I get to be with my kids. When I stepped into more work on this platform and more work on the book, I really struggled with, but I still, so I just say right now I'm somewhere in between. I'm with my kids, I'm working on this book. I keep it very casual because it doesn't, we give it gravitas and we just have to feel good about whatever way we respond.
Yeah. And I don't really think we are our titles, we are our labels, we are our roles. Like I talk a lot about like what is your soul craving, which can be a very intimidating question to people, but I'm like, what do you want? And that's like, I don't know, because you have to have capacity to even answer that question,
Mm,
right? To be able to put pen to paper or go for a solo walk and hear yourself to be like, this is working or this isn't working. And you were talking about like the cultural expectations or stereotypes, and I feel that inside of me, and I battle when in transition. So my husband and I kind of like flopped, not like swap gender roles, and he was quote unquote stay at home dad for a while. I call him the domestic engineer, and now we're like partners. So it's funny to see how um when he goes to like a networking thing, like we play a game of, I'm like, what are you going to say when they ask you what you do? And so he just makes something up every single time. He's like, it's hilarious to watch the reaction. And then when people ask me as well, I'm like, how can I creatively respond to this ridiculous question that people ask. This is why we are so exhausted. Don't ask me what I do. Ask me what lights me up. Like, let's
Mm,
get past the weather and get to the root of life. Because regardless if you have children or not, and also I'm entering that sandwich generation of, okay, maybe my kids are older and they're, in the school system, but now I can see shit like the next season coming. And when I was like reading your book and learning just like I was just like, finally this
mm,
conversation has gone over an edge where it's like there is no running or some proving, right? Like we're always having to like observe those parts of ourselves, but there could be many power pauses in your life. And also, what a privilege. What a
mm,
privilege to be well resourced enough, or at least have been proactive to have a power pause. Like, isn't that the point of life? To be present and connected? Like, what are we running towards, anyways? So, just, yeah,
mm.
curious about those other power pauses, maybe not
Yeah.
just motherhood.
It's so interesting you bring that up. First of all, I think one of the biggest challenges I had was my cover design for the book because there was a picture of a woman with a stroller.
Mm,
And I thought, well, that's actually literally not representative of when women oftentimes it's during any moment of transition, right? So it could be after maternity leave. It could be oftentimes when you're adding a multiple, so adding a second child, third child. Oftentimes diagnoses. So whether it's a personal diagnosis, but often around the third grade mark, because you see neurodivergence start to appear then,
yep.
teen mental health, kids applying to college, elder care,
Mhm.
right? And so you're looking at all these different junctures. And, when I think about the point of the power pause, it's never to say pauses are the right choice. It's to dismantle the idea that there's a stay at home and working parent, that instead there's this sort of vast gray area that we can hold more fluidly because we as women are going to have a number of thoughtful pauses and interval sprints and shifts to make room for the other priorities because it's real life and it is a long, long game.
Yeah.
And I think when you were talking about, well, asking women what lights them up, one of the gifts of this stage of life when you part with the path for a moment, when you part with, oh, I've been in this career for 10 years and they've told me that success looks like this title or this salary bump, you have to tune into, well, what does success actually look like? Because very quickly you're going to start feeling this nudge that's like, oh, I'm like a little lost. When women say they're lost, it's because they feel like life is happening to them. And that's very easy to happen when you have a 3 and 1 year old and no help. Trust me, I was there and no help. And you're looking around being like, oh my God, I'm just trying to get through the day. The way we dignify our time is through goals, right? Through
Mhm.
things that make us feel like we ourselves are moving forward in a direction that is true to us. And I think goals can sound really contrived. They can sound lofty, especially as a mom in the thick of it. But instead, if you do nothing, if you don't get the book, there's one exercise that I always suggest to people, which is write in great detail how you would spend a day in 5 years. Like who you are spending your time with, how do you feel in your body, how do you feel in your mind, what are you working on, what's your relationship like with your partner and your kids and your friends. Not because that's who you're going to be tomorrow, but because it reveals to you your most authentic personal goals, your
Yeah.
creative or professional goals, your family goals and values, right? And then from there you can start to strip it down to like a really small measurable thing. For me, like you, my personal goal was regulation and reactivity, like healing the reactivity in me. And motherhood challenged me to do that. And when I was seeing my future self, when I really had a chance to look at what that ideal version looked like, that was a piece that I wanted to work on. That was my truest success metric. And so for me, the tiny metric of success during that year that I was really in it was listen to one podcast a week on women and emotion. women in
Mm.
communication, women in anger, right? And so in this way, we can start to move ourselves forward in a direction that actually lights us up, that actually aligns with where we truly want to be when we strip away the titles and when we strip away the pressures.
I just see this, like, as you're talking, how feminism, like getting in the workforce, like proving like our value, like how like just this accolades and awards and education, and then these kids come into our damn lives and just crack us and show us all the little slivers of possibilities of like, hey, you're performing, you're not actually living. And I talk a lot about that. And, you know, when control is there or perfectionism, it will break you. And at the end of the day, like you said, like what is success? Like externally you can see that on others. You're like, I want that too, but you really don't. You are after a feeling, you are after an experience. And I see it every day in the work that I do. Like, oh, I want this. Okay, cool. They get there, and I'm like, but it's the feeling that you're after. So be very, very clear. If you want to feel free, if you want to feel connected, if you want to feel alive, that's going to require you to look within. You cannot just look without. And it's so
Mm,
easy to be scrolling on the internet and go, I want that, I want that, I want that, with this external validation. And for me personally, motherhood has cracked me and made me look in the mirror more times than I ever probably wanted to. But it was this returning home to self. And also, I mean, it made me rise from a place that I never knew was possible. Um, and I see power pauses in like moments. Like, yes, there can be
mm,
seasons, there can be big transitions, but sometimes a power pause could be like this morning when I opened my eyes and I was like, "Oh shit, I think I need to deep rest. I think I need deep nervous system support." My son is actually moving out in 2 days cross country. Like, this is like his big thing, and I'm like, "I'm good. We've been on an emotional roller coaster up to now, but I can feel the grief, the sadness, and also the deep gratitude and how proud I am, but it's this transition." And so
mm,
I had to create a power pause moment for myself, and I know I'm gonna have to definitely create that next week when I probably have my little breakdown. Um, but we're sometimes I just think we're running way too fast and trying to prove
mm.
our value and our worth rather than having these little power pauses.
Yeah, I love that because I did the same for myself in June. I just took, I think part of it just came up with the kids navigating diagnoses, the kids ending school, they preparing for sleepaway were very different. But this sort of these milestones. But I also think it was this reflection of I did it. I did the book, and the book came out, and it did the thing I wanted it to do. I do believe it's changing the cultural conversation. I
Yeah.
do believe it's supporting women. And now, where, what do I want for myself? And I needed that month. I needed a month of what does success look like for me? And it doesn't need to be an ideal day in 5 years. It can be an ideal day this fall, right? And so I'm looking forward a little bit and saying, how lucky am I to get to design this and not allow it to design in itself, right? Because, and I think when you come up with, I think a lot about North Stars, like what is you use it in business all the time. What is that thing you are moving toward, right? That keeps you, it's your legacy, it's how you want to be remembered. And I think a lot about, well, if I want to achieve that, it becomes the filter of how I'm spending my time. And you
Yeah.
talked a little bit about the sort of supermom pressures, right? This idea that, and I think sadly, and I love social media. I think social media has been a gift for women. I think it has allowed us to create from a place of independence, and we've been able to build community in a really amazing way. I credit it to what I've been able to do, and it should come with a PSA, which is as you're scrolling, you are seeing corners of what people are choosing to focus on, right? So if someone is having a thriving podcast and someone else has like perfectly dressed children and someone else has a beautifully curated meal, it we're not seeing what they're letting go behind. That is what they're choosing to focus on. And, maybe the curated meal, they're like, there's a ton of childcare, or they're letting go the work stuff go in the background. But sadly, our mind plays tricks on us and puts together this composite, this ideal of what we're supposed to do. And I think knowing that has reinforced media and culture's messaging to us,
Yeah.
and actively unsubscribing and actively choosing for ourselves, well, these are the things that light me up. When we decide that we're actively unsubscribing from that, I think that's where we get to choose. We're going to focus on this, and we're going to accept that this isn't for right now,
Yeah.
and we're going to embrace that this gets to shift. And I think when you have that sort of ancient navigation system, the North Star, it allows you to sort of filter your decisions through that. So then, if I choose to serve my children chicken nuggets and hot dogs, it passes through the filter of, is this letting me be a calmer, present parent?
Yeah.
Yes. So it's okay.
Yeah. It's like, what is in alignment in this moment? And I am just so incredibly grateful for this conversation, because what I'm taking away from this bigger picture is you have to ask yourself, what is the life I want to be living? Where do I need to be right now? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and giving yourself permission. It feels like yes, it's a rebrand on stay-at-home motherhood, which doesn't even make sense anymore. Like there's no work. And um but for me, it just feels like a huge permission slip
Mm,
to ask yourself, am I living the life I want to be living, or am I living to please somebody else? And kind of taking yourself off the hook of that. You're always going to have contrast. You're always going to have people who are like, why are you doing that? Um, and sometimes I think that's where, we develop our strength and our courage is, yeah, that's not the life I want to be living. Like, there's these I just did a solo podcast on how I was I'm constantly asking myself, how can I buy back my time and energy? And sometimes that's delegation. And the one thing that continuously stresses me out is food prep. And it's a priority for me. So I hired somebody to do all the grocery shopping and food prep and all the things. And the amount of resistance I had to start outsourcing that, or have these like household management duties like outsource. I'm like, my kids are older. I don't need this. And I'm like, but Heather, you have way more on your plate professionally. Um, and I had a lot of anger. And that
mm,
anger was for the generations before me who judged me, or I
mhm,
felt the judgment was there of like, you are a bad mother if you outsource this. And the
mhm.
contradiction, because it just feels so primal. Like, even though I know intellectually it's not necessarily my truth. So these conversations are literally changing the culture for women. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you shared about help. It's one of the topics I could go deep on any day. I think it is, I think we not only need a permission slip to redefine ambition and
Yeah.
success and allow it to shift, but I think we need permission to also enjoy these stages of life and not have to struggle through it to earn our stripes, and realize that our health and wholeness impacts the entire household. So those investments in help, those investments, those moments that we lower the expectations on some things, are impactful to the whole household and the whole community, and ultimately like our entire existence.
Yeah. So Neha, where can people find you? Where can they get your book? What do you have coming up?
Mm. You can find me at Neha Ruch on Instagram. You can subscribe and access a number of free resources to navigate the stage of life at thepowerpause.com. And of course, you can buy the book, The Power Pause, wherever you love to get books.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.